Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
I will welcome you in my 15th lecture relating to technology transfer through strategic alliance and joint venture. I was talking with you relating to the joint venture agreement, and I have discussed several issues relating to the joint venture agreement, like matter of the governance, business plan. Then in my last lecture I talked with you about shareholders agreement. In this lecture I will concentrate more on specific issues of share transfer in joint venture, and these issues are basically consequence of the shareholder agreement, or rather I should say you should include these particular issues in the shareholder agreement to avoid the future difficulties in the joint venture. So, first of all, I like to draw your attention relating to the restriction of transfer of shares. So, restriction on transfer of shares. So, in the joint venture agreement, there might be some kind of restriction provided relating to the transfer of the shares and who can be the transferee of that particular shares. Transferee means that can you transfer the share to another venturer, or if you transfer the share to another venturer, in what conditions you can do that. Now, please consider when I am talking about the another venturer, there might be more than 2 venturer. So, if there is a 3 venturer or 4 venturer or 5 venturer in that particular joint venture, then you might create a provision which specify then in what circumstances you can transfer the shares to whom. Next important thing is that can you transfer the shares beyond the joint venturers in that particular joint venture. That means, can you transfer the share to the third party who is not party to that particular joint venture, and if you allow so, then in that case in what circumstances you allow that. Yesterday I have talked about this particular issue on some extent, but this is a contentious issue, because many of the time it might so happen that for the regulatory reason you need to withdraw from a particular market, and if you have a foreign venture, then in that case regulator might prescribe even that after passing of the certain time you need to reduce your holding. So, in those circumstances, how you are going to transfer your stake to the third party if the existing venturers are not interested to purchase the shares, or existing venturers are interested to get a new partner into that particular joint venture itself. Now, the next important issue which is related to this is selecting of the affiliates. Now, will you allow your subsidiary to join in the joint venture? So, important thing is that who is an affiliate, that need to be defined. So, is it that subsidiary will be which will be called as affiliate, or is it the member of a group company will be called as an affiliate? Is it that you have a business associate with whom you have a strategic alliance, he will be called, or I mean it will be called as a affiliates to you. So, defining the affiliate is very important, and in what condition and in what terms the shares can be transferred to the affiliate. That is also one of the important issue to be included in the joint venture agreement. Next issue is, if the affiliate cease to exist, that means you are a strategic alliance who was the affiliate in this particular joint venture, and because of his status of an affiliate he acquires some kind of controlling stake or maybe ownership into this particular joint venture organization, and then for one or other reason that particular affiliate cease to be affiliate. That means the strategic alliance with one of the venturer is no more exist. Then in that case, what should be the consequence? Is it that the affiliate has to sell the shares back to the existing joint venture, or affiliate will have a right to sell the shares into the open market, or the affiliate cannot exit that particular venture until a particular time is expired. So, whatever the process you choose, you need to spell it out in the joint venture agreement itself. Now, let me take you to the next point relating to the pledge of shares, and you will find in today's world the pledge of shares is became one of the very important issue for the purpose of corporate borrowing, and many of the time the pledge of the shares is help promoters to get a required financing for the short term or even for the purpose of working capital too. So, whatever the circumstances is, they need to define the pledges right. Now, you might be wondering what is this pledge is all about and under which law it governs. Now, in the simplest term, pledge means giving the shares of the company as a security for the purpose of raising the loan. And legal term, it says that you are keeping the movable property as a security to secure a loan, and this particular pledge is actually governed by Indian Contract Act. So, what kind of pledge the co-venturers can exercise, you need to detail out within the joint venture agreement itself. So, you have to determine that who can be the pledgee. That means, who can keep these particular shares and give the loan. Is it that the venturer, co-venturer itself? Is it that a financial institutions? Now, if I say it is a financial institution, then you need to specify what kind of financial institution. Is it required to be a scheduled bank? Is it required to be a public financial institution? Is it a corporation bank? Can you place the shares to private NBFCs? So, what kind of financial institutions you are looking for, that you need to specify. Next thing is that the pledgee must agree to the specific provisions of the joint venture agreement. That means, if there is any call right or drag along right or right to first refusal or right to first offer or other transaction right, you should be agreed on that thing. Now, I have named many of the right, which I am going to discuss with you in the subsequent part of my lecture, because these are the specific right which is developed through the contractual process or through the conditionality in the joint venture agreement. And now, and for your information, these particular rights or the standards which has been developed over the years as a joint venture practice in a different market, and this is now quite standardized as a part of the joint venture agreement too. Sometimes these particular rights are governed by the existing law of the jurisdiction where you want to incorporate your organization, and most of the time this is governed by joint venture agreement itself. So, whatever the kind of right you get, pledgee should have some restriction or should be subjected to this particular right. So, pledgee cannot override this particular right when some shares has been pledged to him for the purpose of a loan or to use it as a purpose of the security. Now, the next important thing is considering requiring the interest which will remain with the pledgee. Now, pledgee will have a limited right. Now, again I am repeating, who is a pledgee? The person who is holding the shares of a venture as a security, and the pledger should always continue with the original right which is given to him or her under the joint venture agreement. So, this right include right to veto, management right, etc. And generally you should see that this particular right should be conferred on the pledger, and this cannot be taken out by the pledge agreement, because if it is given to the pledgee, sometimes it might create a difficulty even running of the JV, or it might be a potential difficulty for governance of the JV. So, you should always make it sure that the pledger should continue with the original right, even if the share has been pledged to a pledgee for a short term or purpose of securing the debt. Now, let me take you to the next issues, which in generally known as determining of triggering events. Now, when I am talking about determining of triggering events, I am basically indicating those circumstances where either by default or certain non-default scenario determines the joint venture. So, that means the partner basically severs their right in that particular joint venture, and they realize their assets and whatever the rights they have in that particular joint venture. And in generally, the triggering events is divided into a two broad category, that is a default and that is a non-default. Now, default are those particular scenario where the one of the joint venturer committed a breach to the joint venture agreement, and that particular breach should be of a material nature. Now, this breach of a material nature is purely a legal understanding, but let me simplify for your understanding. Breach of material interest means that there is a certain condition in that joint venture are of such importance that if you breach those particular conditionality or the condition or the terms in the joint venture agreement, it actually affects the right of the co-venturers to the extent that it is difficult to continue with that particular joint venture itself. So, if co-venturer commit a breach of the conditionality of a joint venture agreement, then it is treated that it is a default condition of severity of the joint venture partner in the joint venture agreement. Now, let me talk about the non-default events or the circumstances. Non-default events or circumstances are such which is more of externality to this particular joint venture agreement. That means, parties are trying to comply the conditionalities, but there is some external condition or maybe in some cases some internal condition which debarring the party to continue further with this particular joint venture agreement. Now, if there is a failure, frustration in the business, frustration in terms of failure of achieving certain business, sell, operation target, etc. That means, you have brought a particular product into the market or technology in a particular market, and you thought that people will be responsive to this particular product which is coming out of the technology, because you are using a superior technology and the product is a superior in nature. But that particular product might not be accepted a lot by the consumer in that particular market because of several external factors, like it might be the cost has gone up because of the regulatory reason or the tax regime of that particular place. It might be consumer habit, it might be the preference of a heterogeneous consumer in that particular market. So, there can be several reasons which frustrate your business. Second aspect, which is more internal, if there is a deadlock in the management and neither of the management is ready to negotiate the deadlock scenario, then again there is a possibility to get the frustration into that particular business. Next might be that the third party offers for the interest to one or both of the co-venturers, and one of the ventures are interested to sell its stake to the third party, and the other venturers think that if that particular venturer exit from the business, it might affect the joint venture severely, because this venturer might have brought some crucial thing to that particular venturer on which this particular venture is based. Now, it might be the technology which is crucial to the business. It might be type of investment which this particular venturer brought into this particular venture. It might be the market knowledge which the venturer brought into that particular venture. So, that means something which is very crucial for the success of that particular venture, and that particular venturer is exiting the joint venture and wanted to sell it to the third person. Next one is a change in business strategy. You have changed the business strategy because of several reasons. It might be change in a regulatory environment. It might be the change in a technology. It might be change in a consumer preference. It might be change in a level of consideration in the market. So, because of the several reasons, you find that there is a change in a market structure, and in that circumstances it is difficult for you to survive, and in those circumstances again you decide to get yourself parted from the venture. Now, whatever you do, either it is a default condition or non default condition, you might define about the life of this particular venture, because there is several issues which are attached with it. Maybe it might be lending issues which are attached with it. It might be the regulatory aspect, wherein it might say regulatory, in the, if you look into the foreign direct investment or other foreign policy, wherein it is prescribed that the foreign partner need to continue with the investment for at least 5 years before they withdraw from that particular market. So, there might be a lot of boundary condition which compel the venturer to continue for certain years of time or certain period of time, or even there might be the internal condition or the business environment or the business risks. Because of that, you need to continue this particular venture for some point of time. Now, let me take you to the next issue of put right. Now, you will find there is a two concept which is used in simultaneously. One is known as a put right, another is a call right. Generally, put right is given to the minority stakeholder in a joint venture. I have discussed with you other day when I was talking about the ownership structure. In a joint venture, there might be somebody who has a majority stake and somebody who might have a minority stake. So, put right is given to those particular person who are having a minority stake, or it can negotiated by the minority stakeholder or minority shareholders while they are entering into a joint venture agreement. And put right include the several issues, like if they wanted to go out of the venture, what price they are going to get, how they can whom they can sell these shares, how they can decide the value of their other rights in that particular venture. Like if you remember, yesterday I was talking about issues of the technology. If you develop certain technology in the venture, who will have the ownership? So, this kind of right. So, put right generally triggers in change in a regulatory framework, and once there is a change in a regulatory framework, you need to reorganize or restructure the JV. So, put right is actually sort of a protection which is given to the minority stakeholder in the JV. Now, again you will find there is a call right. Call right is basically goes to the majority. Call right gives the right to other venturer or ability to other venturer to acquire the stake or the shares from the minority venturers. and to give them a right to exercise the call right or call options, so that they can get rid of minority shareholders whom they might think are no more requires or creating an obstacle for the growth of a venture. So, put right is for the minority in the venture, whereas the call right is the majority in that particular venture. And in both the cases, as I have told you a little before, you need to talk about the pricing of the shares, which of the shares can be sold, in what manner, what kind of consideration you can give. Can you give a cash, or can you give some other type of instrument? How you are going to value the shares? Because please remember, the valuation is difficult, as I have discussed with you in the last lecture. If that particular company is a private limited company and are doing in a segment which is not very popular segment. So, the next now let me take you to the next issues relating to right of first offer. Now, right of first offer, and subsequently I will talk with you right of refusal, which is basically known as right of first refusal. In both the cases, this comes from a right which is otherwise known as predatory right. In this particular case of first offer, the co-venturers who is selling its stake need to offer to sell the stake to the existing co-venturers. That means, if there is a 2 co-venturers or 3 co-venturers, let us take it like A, B and C, and C want to exit from that particular joint venture, then C need to make an offer to A and B to purchase that particular shares or purchase its shares. So, that is known as a right to first offer. So, this venturer can purchase that particular shares, and if they do not, then in that case they can C can sell the shares to the third person. Now, if we are talking about right to first refusal, then in that circumstances the co-venturers make an offer to other co-venturers in the terms of a third party. That means, if the third party is making an offer to purchase the shares to a co-venturers, so when the co-venturer is selling the share, he is also taking the same kind, giving the same kind of offer to the existing co-venturers. That means, it will be a same kind of pricing, same kind of terms and condition, and this also give a kind of advantage for the existing co-venturers to know what is the pricing of the shares of that particular venture. So, many of the time you will find the right to first offer, right to first offer is less beneficial than right to refusal. So, whatever you choose, that you are going to give a right to first offer or right to first refusal, you need to have adequate provision made into the joint venture agreement. Now, let me come into the next issue, which is known as tag alone, and simultaneously we also use another concept called drag alone. In case of a tag alone, we give some special right to the minority co-venturers to tag along with any sales by other co-venturers. That means, what we are trying to tell you that you need to give an opportunity to minority shareholder to exit from the venture along with other co-venturers in the same kind of terms and condition. And you will find tag along right is raise a number of issues. If the co-venturer permitted to sell less than all the interest, and this number of issues may include the different kind of right you have associated with different kind of right which is associated in this particular joint venture. It might be right relating to the ownership, right relating to the business plan, right related to technology which has been developed, so much so forth. Similarly, there is another concept which we use called a drag along, and wherein the co-venturer in certain circumstances require other co-venturer to sell its share into a third party offer. So, that means you have been dragged even if you are not interested. Let me give you an example. You find in a venture there is a 3 venturers are there. One is a majority stakeholders and other 2 are minority stakeholders. But these minority stakeholders, 2 minority stakeholders hold more stake or more shares in the joint venture than a single majority stakeholder. So, third person might be interested to acquire the shares of both these venturers, so that he gets the majority right. So, that means, if you want to sell the shares, you need to drag the another minority also with you, so that you can perform this particular transaction. So, that is called a drag along right, or you can have a provision relating to the drag along right adequately in your joint venture agreement. Now, the next important thing is treatment of joint venture debt. Now, where the co-venturer have financed by the joint venture debt or guaranteeing the debt, while purchasing the shares by the co-venturers, they need to purchase the debt also. That means, they need to take the liabilities also. If it is a third party, then also the third party required to take that particular liability. And if you want to have this kind of a provision, then that need to be incorporated in your joint venture agreement too. Now, let me take you to the next one relating to the regulatory aspect of exiting the transactions. And while you are exiting the transaction, you need to comply with all the regulatory conditions. Timing issues may arise where the regulatory approval are required, to complete an exit transaction. I told you few minutes back that the foreign direct investment policy might say that you cannot withdraw your investment before a particular time period. Now, you also need to consider any other kind of impact wherein you need to have a regulatory permission for exiting the market. The next issue or most important issue is the closing process. So, whenever the parties to this particular venture close this joint venture, you need to go through the several process. Because the joint venture may be for the specific years, and how you are going to close the joint venture, that need to be defined under the joint venture agreement in a very clear terms. So, you need to talk about the obligation under the agreement and how you are going to sell the interest and how further it can be enforced. You need to talk about the nominees on the joint venture management board, you may need to talk about the third party co-venturer, buyer, co-venturer buying or acting on behalf of any particular co-venturers. And you might need to talk about the provision relating to the guarantee which co-venturers or warranty which co-venturers is going to give during the sale of the co-venture interest. So, the exit process is a complex process. And in the exit process, it is always advisable that you should have a smooth transaction. Otherwise, it is difficult to realize the proceed out of that particular venture. And the same may be bottleneck for your future venture too. So, I will advise to you that you define the exit policy in a very clear terms, so that during the exit you can avoid any kind of a dispute or the differences with your co-venturers. Thank you.